a researcher from Notre Dame wanted to look into why college-educated people support the Tea Party. Now, already the basis of the study is kind of funny. Like, why does he want to know that? It seems like he's a little surprised that college-educated people would be supportive of the Tea Party. But he realized that the bubble that you live in has a lot to do with it. Now, here's what he found through his study. College graduates are more likely to support the Tea Party ideas if they live in counties characterized by high levels of residential segregation based on education level. Now, before we go further, just think about what your education level in most cases determines. If you are highly educated, you're more likely to be in a better socioeconomic status. Now, of course, that's rapidly changing considering how many student loans people are taking out. So the dynamic will certainly change in the future. But for the time being, if you have higher education under your belt, you're more likely to be in a better socioeconomic status. The researchers found the correlation, remember correlation, not causation, but it's still a strong correlation between Tea Party support and educational segregation to be uniquely strong compared to factors like racial segregation and class segregation. So what the researchers found here is that if you are in your own little bubble and you identify as a Tea Party supporter, you're more likely to be in favor of things like less governmental programs for the poor, so less government spending. They usually use that euphemism to explain that. Or you're in favor of small government. And if you are from a higher socioeconomic status, or if you have higher education and you live in that bubble, you're less likely to understand the perspectives of those who didn't have the same opportunities as you or the same income as you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, there's definitely a liberal version of this bubble.
Of course.
Like we don't understand because we don't live like in the deep south or something. We don't understand the danger from immigrant children coming across with polio and tuberculosis and stuff like that. We're not terrified of that because we live in this bubble where that seems crazy. There's lots of things that we don't understand. And I think this is a good explanation for why some educated people follow the Tea Party. There are certainly others. I think that one of the problems, and I've read multiple explanations for why wealthy people follow the Tea Party, the differences between the Tea Party and like the religious right and things like that, the moral majority, like what are the actual differences between these groups? And the problem really is that academics need to define things, and so they define the Tea Party as one thing, but the Tea Party isn't one thing. And people join for different reasons. Certain Tea Party offshoots might be more focused on economic issues versus social issues and things like that, and that makes the academic study of the movement incredibly hard.
Yeah, and by the way, I love that you mentioned that because remember, when the Tea Party first started out, it was because they were angry at the financial sector. They were angry at the fact that, you know, people were having their tax money wasted on pointless wars. They were angry about the bailout, like understandable reasons for banding together and being against the government. And then they were kind of co-opted by the Koch brothers, by the religious right, and all of a sudden they're more socially conservative, and people start joining because, you know, they identify as social conservatives that are against gay marriage and abortion and stuff like that. But in this study, he's specifically looking at the issue of small government and government spending. Now, his name is Rory McVeigh. He's the person who did the study. And here's what he said. My thinking was that people who are likely to embrace Tea Party ideology are more likely to be people who have had some success in life and limited exposure to those who haven't enjoyed the same advantages. Education is such an important predictor of how you end up in life. Now, here's what I also love. The report also notes that educated white middle-class Republicans are more likely to support the Tea Party regardless of educational segregation in their county, although educational segregation exacerbates this likelihood.
Yeah. So I talked earlier about sort of the liberal version of these bubbles. The difference between people who are relatively well off or who have more education, and those are correlated pretty strongly, is not whether or not they're exposed to economic hardship necessarily or people of different racial groups, but it's that you have the inherent compassion and empathy to imagine what it would be like to be in that position. The problem fundamentally with many Tea Party politicians is not just that they don't know poor people or that they haven't spent time in minority communities. It's that they think that that knowledge is irrelevant. And why even go for it? Why try to understand it? It doesn't matter. I already know better. And they're wrong. You need that empathy to understand what's going on in those communities to craft policies that are actually going to benefit them.
Yeah, you need that empathy, but also just to kind of add on to that, I think that a lot of people who start off, middle class or working class and manage to make themselves very, very successful fail to understand that they had certain opportunities given to them that poor people did not have given to them. So for instance, there's this whole issue of institutional racism. And it's really hard to understand institutional racism unless A, you're open to understanding it, or B, you're a victim of it yourself. So if you are a white individual, we talk about white privilege time to time. White privilege includes the notion that you don't have to worry about being stopped and frisked when you're in New York, right? It includes the fact that you don't have these certain obstacles that minorities have to go through, right? The fact that if you have a black hand and you're trying to sell an iPad or an iPod or something like that through eBay, you're less likely to sell it compared to someone who has a white hand.
Or you'll make less money.
Or you'll make less money. So these are all little things that are really, really hard to understand unless you have the empathy, the willingness to learn about these things, or if you've experienced it yourself. We all live in our bubbles. We live in our own bubble here, right? And so just because you were able to become successful doesn't mean that everyone had equal footing. People have different experiences in life.
Yeah, and by the way, I empathize with what these University of Notre Dame researchers are trying to do. In the end, when I was in grad school, I was studying ideology. If I was there, I'd probably be doing studies like this. It is incredibly difficult because ideally, Americans would have relatively high ideological consistency between positions. Like if they support gay marriage versus not supporting it, you should be able to know quite a bit about the other policies that they support or not. But most people don't have the time to study politics, the time to really care about many issues, so they don't have a high level of political sophistication. They have low consistency between positions, and so you want to be able to map out that this is a Tea Party person right here, but in the end you have people who have seemingly in some cases random assortments of values and positions. It makes it very hard to map out what an average person is like, and so we need work like this, but in the end it's hard to explain why a movement like the Tea Party has the sort of support that it does.